Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, June 13th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about Donald Trump's approval rating, hitting a brand new low nationwide as he faces a fallout, with Elon Musk faces all across the country, protests erupting around the immigration decisions of this administration, and a number of other issues ranging from university handling to the GOP budget bill that are bringing Donald Trump's approval down at a very important time for this second Trump administration. Now, the poll here comes from Quinnipiac University, which does a lot of national polls, but the point is that what they find is a general trend line that we are seeing across a number of other polls that have been released over the week that are showing that Donald Trump, on some of his key and most important issues that arguably won him the last presidential election, the American public is souring on him. Headline after headline is showing that Donald Trump on immigration, that Donald Trump on university management, that Donald Trump on whatever it might be is starting to find that the voters just simply don't approve of what he is doing nationwide. And it really does make a lot of sense. Some of the things that we are seeing from the Republican Party and from Donald Trump and his presidential, from the Oval Office are decisions that aren't necessarily in line with what the majority of the nation would like to see from Donald Trump's administration. And what we're finding with the mass deportations now rhetoric and the way that we are seeing now, most recently yesterday, Senator Alex Padilla from the state of California arrested for asking questions to Secretary Kristi Noem. You have to ask, are these things that optically, whether you agree with them or not, are going to be beneficial for how Donald Trump works with Congress, with how Donald Trump navigates executive orders and public approval on the decisions that the White House is doing? And almost every single time, from a PR perspective, again, whether you agree with it or not, the Trump administration has only made things more difficult for themselves in just about 5 months of being in office. And what we're finding is that with this large collapse in approval is that Donald Trump jeopardizes the way that the Republican Party can navigate the next year and a half as they go into what they are largely expecting to be a very big midterm election in pushback against the Republican Party. Now, this Quinnipiac University poll isn't just one poll. We're seeing that the downtick is starting, but it happens at decisions and moments like this where very big national headlines make Donald Trump and his administration largely look bad. And it makes sense, right? When you're looking at the approval rating for Donald Trump, he was recovering it a bit. Around April, it started to reach low points where nearly 10 points more of the nation disapproved of the job that Donald Trump was doing. But now we're seeing that in the most recent poll from AP and NRC, that the disapproval rating hits negative 21 points. These are very bad points. It isn't just Quinnipiac University that's saying it. It is a number of high-quality and mainstream pollsters that are saying, while Donald Trump might have been approved of before, this pretty consistent downturn can be explained by what Donald Trump is doing on the national stage and how Americans are receiving it. Quinnipiac, I use this as the prime example because it's a bit more of the middle of the road here. I think negative 21%, certainly can be right with different sects of the country, but I do think negative 16 is largely getting at to what we might be seeing as Donald Trump continues down this pathway. But what also, to the reason I wasn't just using it for the midpoint for the fact that it was negative 16 as something that was a bit more of a balance, but also because on the issues, they show us that when it comes down to Republican support, Democratic support, and in the crosstabs and on an individual issue basis, where Donald Trump is really starting to see this collapse. And all we have to do is just take a look at the way that people are viewing the economy, deportations, trade, universities, Israel, Hamas, whatever it might be. Donald Trump is all in the negative. And I think this is also really where you see a big disconnect between how Donald Trump and his administration is navigating coming off the last presidential election, where the way that voters viewed Donald Trump on the economy was a lot better than the way that they viewed Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or any other Democrat in the hypothetical 2024 polls, because that's what his big selling point was. Prices are high. On day one, I will lower them. Taxes are high. On day one, I will lower them. These were all issues that Donald Trump campaigned on. The two biggest things that I think we most remember from the last election was that Donald Trump campaigned that the tariffs would save the economy. On the other hand, he campaigned on a stronger southern border defense, tackling what many people saw as a southern border crisis. That led Donald Trump to victory. Today, voters don't necessarily see Donald Trump as positively as they once did. On immigration issues, stands to be his highest performing number, and that metric only puts him at a 43% approval rating, with 54% of the nation disapproving of the job that he's doing on immigration. On deportations, when people see families ripped apart the same way we saw in Trump 1, voters suddenly realize or decide, whatever it might be, that this is going too far. Just 40% say that the deportations, they approve of them. 56% disapprove. On the economy, again, one of the most mainstream issues of the last cycle, 56% disapprove, 40% approve. On trade, 38 disapprove to approve. Universities, Harvard University, 54-37. A lot of conversation around there. Obviously, it's close to home if you know anything about me, right? 54-37. There's a reason the public doesn't like some of these decisions that Donald Trump is doing, right? Israel-Hamas conflict. What did he say? What did he do? He went to Dearborn. He said, Biden started this war. Biden is the reason why you are abandoning him. And he said, I will solve this. I will work with Netanyahu. And did he do it? Well, today escalated conflict. Yesterday escalated conflict. For the past 5 months, has the war been finished? Is there peace? And the answer is no, right? And that has been what has also been omnipresent for Donald Trump in his relationship with many different groups that he made all these promises to, whether it was on Israel-Hamas, whether it was on universities, whether it was on trade, the economy, deportations, immigration, almost every single group that at one point in time was holding up the approval, saying it's 1 month into Trump 2, he'll figure it out. It's 3 months into Trump 2, he'll figure it out. It's 5 months into Trump 2, and he hasn't figured it out, but promised it on day 1. You have to think, we're 10% into the administration, right? Obviously feels like a lot longer than that because so much is happening. But at the same time, so much is happening and nobody is liking it. That is where the disconnect is between, that press secretary podium and what the actual American public is hearing, seeing, believing, and responding to. Russia-Ukraine war, the lowest metric for Donald Trump, not as much of a mainstream issue for average Americans, still bad, 57-34. And so when I think about, and the way that I think you should think about this too, from strictly an electoral perspective, it's never good to be at this low point in terms of approval, right? This reminds me a lot, and ignore the generic ballot, we'll get back to it in a moment, but this reminds me a lot of when we were talking about Trump's approval, when we were talking about, Biden's approval, what did in both of these, candidates in their previous elections in 2020 was Trump was largely disliked. Biden was liked in contrast. In 2024, it was a bit more of a flipped thing where Trump was outpacing Biden in the beginning, right? What we saw was that we can just see if they do a continuous one. I'm surprised they don't. Normally they do. Don't get me wrong. I think that I must have just pulled it away. Let me just see President Trump job approval. Let me see if I can just, I guess maybe not. Ignore me. But the point is, what I'm trying to make here is that when it comes down to the way that voters view Donald Trump and the way that they viewed him in the last election, a lot of it had to do with how he was viewed in contrast with Kamala Harris, with Joe Biden, whatever it might be. And so what we saw was that at the earlier stages too of Trump 2 was that Donald Trump was given the benefit of the doubt by the American public, right? What we saw was that voters were saying, I'm going to trust you on the economy. I'm going to trust you on immigration. We can see, right? When it comes down to how these numbers really laid out earlier on, and Real Clear Politics certainly is not updated because I don't think it includes even AP or NRSC, and also the polls going back to early May on immigration don't make sense. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking there, but people gave him the benefit of the doubt. About 2 months in or a month and a half in, plus 12, plus 18, and it was largely a stretch with exceptions of negatives, right? Quinnipiac, which is now at negative 11, what was negative 3, which was honestly a good point for Trump, is now at negative 11. You'll see that it was consistently positive. On the economy, what was consistently positive in the beginning, or at least hopeful, started going very negative very quickly and has maintained itself in the negative way. Foreign policy, this is also one that he really prided himself on, never really was able to get through that one. But all of these issues, again, people think about it, people talk about it, Israel-Hamas. Again, early on in that first set of polls that were released, plus 8, then immediately into the negatives, because all of these promises were made. And all of these promises were said on day one, I will fix these things. And as voters started to become less and less confident that he was going to do it, they started to sour on him. And as they saw things coming through, like the GOP budget bill, this one big, beautiful bill, right, that the Trump administration and the Republican Party is swearing up and down will be the saving grace for their political party and the saving grace for the second Trump admin, we're not seeing it pan out to be that. we're not seeing voters respond to it in a way that they were hoping that they would. And as the approval rating collapses, again, from an electoral perspective, it's a really bad idea for all these things to be happening. It's a really bad, set of circumstances to go into the next midterms with an approval rating like this, because what we learned from the first Trump admin is that although the approval rating does fluctuate, and not somehow, because Donald Trump is very masterful with this, but the way at which he is able to win back groups of voters right before an election does happen, but it doesn't happen to the extent that saves Republicans in midterms when Trump was president before, and it will not be enough to save them this time around. And looking at the 2018 midterm elections, you have to remember that it is this midterm election that is etched into the minds of Republicans from the first Trump administration. The Democrats went from being in a minority of 194 and Republicans maintaining dominance for 8 continuous years, going into 2018, to losing it in 2018. 40-seat pickup for the GOP. I think they're also a bit upset about what happened in the 2022 midterms, where Biden's approval was as low as Trump's was in the first one, but Republicans were only able to gain 10 seats. It was a map, and it was a result that Democrats were pleasantly surprised with, but obviously weren't thrilled with, right? They weren't winning the House majority. But it went to show that the Republican Party in 2022 didn't perform to the best of their ability because of the types of candidates that ran in these races. Because Republicans ran MAGA extremist candidates, without Donald Trump on the ballot, voters rejected that. They rejected them in uniform fashion too. We saw it in the Senate elections, which is why Democrats actually expanded their Senate majority in 2022. These are all things that happened because of Donald Trump's influence in the party primaries, obviously the Dobbs decision as well. A combination of factors led to Democrats doing better than expected. A combination of factors this time around will be the fact that history tells us that the midterm of whoever it might be, the incumbent party, always loses seats, but also the fact that Trump's approval rating now is hitting a new low point. And it's hitting a new low point to the extent that it's bringing down the national average and continues to hammer in these points that as the headlines come out and as these decisions are made on Capitol Hill with the Republican Party, voters don't love them. Voters aren't flocking to support Donald Trump like they did in 2024 because he promised the world. I kid you not, when you look at these sets of promises that Donald Trump made in 2024, there was no circumstance or reality at which he is able to do all of them. Same can be said for the majority of candidates that run for president, but it was unique to Donald Trump in the fact that it wasn't just that he was going to solve these issues, it was that it was going to be day one. And while I don't think that more than 5% of the nation has what we call buyer's remorse, where now they're deciding, oh, I wish I voted for Trump or I wish I voted for Harris. I do think of that 5%, the overwhelming majority are those who voted for Trump. And I do think on the margins, it makes a difference. Because I do think that looking at the way that voters, especially those who recall voting for Trump in the last election, his approval rating isn't super high, right? The way that voters view the big, beautiful bill or whatever it might be isn't super high. Just 67% Republicans support the GOP's budget bill. And so when you really shove this down the throats of Americans and say, this is what you're going to get these cuts, you're going to get this, whatever it might be, and it doesn't actually seem to be tangible or impactful or meaningful or like you're listening to the constituents that elected you, you're not going to be approved of. And when you have a government that does things like they did yesterday in the arresting of a sitting United States senator, when you have AI-generated images on the White House Instagram that voters see and see as an extension of an administration they might already be apprehensive about, but we're giving the benefit of the doubt. These decisions and the way that voters view this administration has largely been defined by actions that even the first Trump administration likely would not have taken. And I think it's because Donald Trump does not have a re-election to worry about that it is this type of thinking that guides the second administration, but there's still elections to come. There's still off-year elections, special elections, midterm elections, a presidential election that Donald Trump wants to play kingmaker in. So there's a lot to worry about. And although Donald Trump himself, barring a constitutional amendment, will not be up for re-election in 2028, he doesn't necessarily have to worry about the approval rating to that extent, but everyone around him does. Because their jobs on Capitol Hill and their jobs in gubernatorial offices and whatever it might be matter. Because Donald Trump very well could be leading the GOP into a loss even bigger than 2018. And this might be the early stages of it forming, but Democrats have luckily done well for their benefit with the right set of circumstances over the past, two midterm cycles, 2018 and 2022. And all the signs seem to be pointing the Democrats will luck out again in 2026 with Donald Trump, in part, being one of their biggest advocates. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.